Thank you. Can we start with Bidenomics? What does it mean for the US citizens, Americans here, and for the anything that happens with the US economy has a global impact? What does Bidenomics means for the global economy as well?
Bidenomics is an importantly different way of growing the U.S. economy from what we call the middle out and the bottom up. For years, economic policy in our country was something called trickle down, where the idea was give tax cuts to the richest people, cross your fingers, and hope against decades of evidence that that would reach the middle class. But it just didn't work, and it doesn't work. President Biden has a very different vision. Invest in America, empower workers, lower costs through greater competition. That's the way of Bidenomics, and that's the way to grow the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down, which has failed us for decades on end.
And what impact does it has on the global economy?
Well, one of the important aspects of Bidenomics is investing in clean energy. Now, some of that is targeted at domestic investment here, and we're certainly not shy about wanting to do that. But one of the things we've seen is foreign domestic investment go up quite significantly since these investment agendas have come online. So we're seeing companies from like Samsung and Panasonic and LG building battery factories across the United States. Also, we believe we're helping to lower the global cost of producing clean energy. And that is a benefit to countries across the globe, of course.
Tell us about the US economy. It grew at 2.4% last quarter, much higher than you all expected. How do you see the US economy growing now?
So we had a 2.4% growth rate in the second quarter. That was well above expectations, and that for the U.S. is really quite a good pace of growth. And there were at least two factors that help us get there. Let me say it again. There were at least three factors that helped us get there. First of all, strong consumer spending. One of the really key attributes of Bidenomics is a tight labor market that empowers workers. Our economy is 68% consumer spending. So if our consumers are doing well in the labor market, if they're facing real pay raises, which has been the case over the past year, that makes a difference to that key sector. We saw a deeper investment in the second quarter, and that relates to what I was just talking about. Various legislative measures have incentivized investment in standing up industry here in the United States, EVs, clean energy, computer chips. Third, inflation came down significantly in the second quarter, and that mechanically boosts growth. So those three factors were all in play.
How do you think, in what way the China is posing a challenge to the US economy, both domestic and globally? And what you're doing to address that?
Well, I think probably one area where China has been most challenging, of course, is in geopolitical conflict. Of course, there's Ukraine and China's relationship there. But as an economist here, I try not to talk about that because we have people whose job it is to provide more of our information about that. From an economic perspective, we still have robust trade flows with the rest of the world, including China. And I think that's important. What we've talked about is de-risking, not decoupling. That is, trying to make sure that we're dealing with supply chain problems, making sure our supply chains are much more resilient, trying to make sure that we're not dealing with countries who want to weaponize technology against us. At the same time that we maintain trade flows that are helpful to keep prices down and take advantage of some of the more positive aspects of globalization.
One question I wanted to ask you about US and India economic relationship. The Prime Minister of India was here last month on a state visit. The two countries talked about growing the economic and trade relationship, right? And the Boeing deal earlier this year would bring in a lot of jobs here in this country. President talked about the true relationship between more focus on business to business, people to people, and being a global public good. Can you give us a sense, how do you think both the countries can work together that so the the country's economy grow together, and they are
Well,
also
very much in the way your question suggested, and of course, in the kind of dialogue that the president and the prime minister had when he was here. That was viewed widely as a very successful visit, particularly in the economic front. And look, we recognize India as a longtime friend of our country, but also as a very much a growing democracy. And so we have strengthened those ties with meetings of this type. Again, I don't want to go further into that because it's the kind of thing that our international diplomats talk more about. From an economic perspective, we remain very much open to global trade, and that means we're open to trading with some of the the larger and the smaller economies out there. But of course, India is right in the middle of that discussion. At the same time, I want to just make it. I think it should be clear that we're also investing domestically, investing in domestic production, welcoming foreign direct investment from other countries, but also standing up the kinds of industry that I talked about in an early comment to you.
The
I
employment.
thought I should probably go. If you want to get one more question, go ahead.
Yeah, one more question. Domestically here, the small businesses, what impact the inflation is having on them? And secondly, in the Silicon Valley, there's huge shortage of manpower because they are not getting qualified people from inside the country. They are talking about getting more people, qualified people from overseas, in particular from India on H-1B. What's your thought on that?
Well, in terms of small businesses, as I've mentioned, one of the things that gave a lift to GDP in the second quarter was lower inflation. And in fact, the GDP inflation measure, that was 2.2% over the quarter. That's the lowest it's been since just around before the pandemic. So the fact that inflation is coming down is especially helpful to some of our smaller businesses. Another piece of this, though, and I think it's been underreported, is that under the Biden-Harris administration, we've done more for helping small businesses interact with the government in terms of getting government loans, getting government grants, in terms of the government procuring the kinds of goods and services that these businesses sell. We hit a record in terms of government procurement from small businesses. There we try to emphasize minority and women-owned small businesses. So I think that's been a pretty positive story. I don't remember what was the second part of your question.
On getting qualified people.
Oh, so look, I think one of the, as I've mentioned earlier, one of the important pillars of Bidenomics is running a very tight labor market. And so we've had a labor market where the unemployment rate has been below 4% for over a year and a half. What that's doing is it's pulling more people into the labor market. We now have labor supply indicators that are at all-time highs. The data going back in some cases all the way to the 1940s, all-time high for pulling people into the job market. So that should help to ameliorate some of those supply crunches that you were referring to.